You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Gearcast. Today we are introducing not one but two new features to our show. The first is the show itself. Today's show is going to be a Gearcast. Starting today and continuing once a month moving forward, we will be recording an episode devoted entirely to new cameras, new lenses, and related gear. The second thing we're springing on you today is a new segment called, for lack of better judgment, Al's Gearhead Pick of the Week. In every episode, we're going to talk about a new camera, a new lens, or other photo-related doodad that's piqued our interest. We'd be curious to hear what you think of our new initiatives. Hashtag it BHGearcast on Twitter, and in all sincerity, subscribe to our show on iTunes. And while you're there, leave us a review. We do read them, and they do help us formulate our show. In today's inaugural B&H Photography Gearcast, we will be talking about third-party lenses, what defines a third-party lens, what are their advantages, disadvantages, and who's making what. Joining us is the inimitable and always adorable Levi Tenenbaum, a trainer and product specialist here at B&H, a frequent guest on the show, and a photographer in his own right. Let's start today's Gearcast with our gear pick of the week. Actually, two picks of the week because I couldn't narrow it down to one. The first is a Nikon 70-200 f2.8e FLED VR. That's their latest 70-200 zoom lens. I had an opportunity to use it. And I actually not only used it, I used its predecessor. The big difference, there's an updated optical formula. It is a sharper lens, a significantly sharper around the corners. If you look at the lens itself, it has 4 autofocus lock buttons going around the barrel, which is nice. You could freeze your focus at any point in time. And interestingly enough, they reversed the zoom and focus rings from where it was traditionally. And I happen to prefer the older, but maybe that's because I'm used to the older style. But the new lens was really, they both performed beautifully. The new lens is a better lens as far as sharpness.
Tiny bit lighter too, right?
It's a hair, and actually it's a hair lighter, but it has more lens elements in it, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. But the size is pretty much the same, and I think the hood is better. It's got less deep cutouts on it, or shallower cutouts.
Well, it focused. The autofocus was super smooth, and this is obviously a workhorse lens for a lot of people, so it'll be a big deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, the price has gone up a little bit too.
It's about $600 more than its predecessor, but if you need what it got, then it's worth getting. The other big news is Kodak Ektachrome. After being discontinued back in 2012, Kodak has announced they're bringing back Ektachrome 100. That's transparency slide film, which is really terrific. It's a beautiful fine-grained film. They'll be making it for still cameras and cinematography, and it'll be out sometime around the end of 2017. I look forward to it. Should we start on third-party lenses, the topic of today?
Absolutely.
I think we've all had experience with them. I know I own lenses from like 4 different companies for the cameras that I've been using. It's interesting how they've come along, and I think a lot of it has to do with the oncoming of mirrorless cameras. All of a sudden, people I think are more open to going to lenses other than the ones made by the camera manufacturer they own. I know most Nikon owners, that's it. They live with Nikon, and most Canon owners go for Canon, Now people are mixing and matching stuff all over the place, and there's some really good lenses out there. Some real good stuff.
Yeah. Let's just jump back to make a simple definition. I mean, obviously, they're lenses that are not from the camera manufacturer that they're used on, correct? Simple enough?
Yes.
But also, for the sake of this, they're not lenses that you need an adapter to use on that camera body.
It depends on the manufacturer. Some of them make them with fixed mounts for dedicated camera.
Right, that's the general idea what we're talking about.
And then they
today,
also
right?
might make, like what they use, a T-mount or some kind of other interchange. But that's not really the big thing anymore at all.
Yeah. So basically, we're talking about lenses that are made by not one of the major manufacturers of cameras. Usually the companies don't make cameras, although in the case of Sigma, they do.
Right.
But I don't think that they're considered a major manufacturer of cameras.
True.
Don't tell them that, though, whatever you do.
And
essentially, it's not.
But they have the mount of that
Yeah.
of that camera manufacturer. All right.
So the advantages of it, You have choices because one of the things about that I think attracted me early on to a lot of the third party was the fact that some of these companies like Sigma and other companies made lenses that Nikon, Sony, Canon didn't manufacture. Might have been faster, different zoom range, focal lengths, whatever,
points.
and and they were also less expensive.
Yeah.
Often.
Always.
Always.
Not always.
Well,
not always.
No,
No, that's true.
Now
That's
you
true.
can't say it anymore
Yeah.
because now they're making lenses
Yeah, like
that
the
are
art line of-
pricey,
yeah.
but compared to the comparable ones from the major manufacturers, they're not so expensive.
We've mentioned this before, but one of the ones who makes what I would really call like a premium lens at this point is Sigma. Because Sigma's making some really amazing lenses right now. They're putting out some very interesting focal lengths, starting off with the 18 to 35 1.8 for APC, 50 to 100, the 150 to 500, which we can all agree is you get what you get. But they're interesting focal lengths. But in
Even
their premium,
fast wide zooms in the art series.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, is particularly in their art series, is where the main brands seem to be trying to cut as much weight as possible and trying to go either more plastics or like composites. Sigma's been kind of dedicated to putting out a big, strong, robust lens. And so when you pick up a Sigma lens, even though you've spent anywhere between $500 and $300 less than the manufacturer product, you feel like you're picking up a real lens.
Quality piece.
It used to be that with a lot of these lenses, if you bought them, you knew that one of the compromises was that you're going to be replacing it a lot sooner than later.
Oh, I did that with my first couple of lenses.
Oh, sure. But the new art lenses and there are a few other manufacturers making lenses comparable to that, of that quality, they're going to outlast your next few cameras. It's kind of a reverse.
Yep.
Some of
And
those
it's still less money.
Those Sigma Primes, those art series, they're not bargain basement. They're kind of pricey. I mean, they're, I'm sure, fairly priced, but
They're still priced less than the comparable lenses from their main
you have the
manufacturers.
Sigma 50 f1.4 is going for $950.
Yeah.
The Nikon 50 f1.4G, $500. Canon f1.2, of course, is up to $1,300. That's a different story, though. You know.
Well, yeah, you're paying
yeah.
for the speed there.
Also, when you look at it, though, the Sigma 50 millimeter 1.4, I'd say is more comparable to what Nikon's doing with the 35 millimeter 1.4 than the 50 1.4G.
Yeah. That G's. Yeah.
So when you look at the 35, if Nikon made a 50 millimeter version of that 35, then I
up
think
there.
you'd be looking at like 1,500.
You think? Yeah.
Oh no, what am I saying? Nikon has the 58. The 58 1.4. It's actually a really nice lens.
No, that's a pricey one, though.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm talking about, though.
What are some of the disadvantages? Let's go there.
There have been issues with electronic compatibility. I know with a few manufacturers, because what happens is the camera manufacturer will update the firmware, but the lens manufacturer has to play catch up. So sometimes there have been serious focusing issues, and I think even at times exposure. I won't swear to that, but I know focus is a big deal.
No, there were definitely exposure issues. The thing to keep in mind is like this: is that if you're buying a dummy lens, which is your basic standard all manual everything, then you don't really have anything to worry about, particularly if the dummy lens is aperture control as well in the lens. So you pretty much have no issues as long as it mounts to the camera body. Right? And even then, even if it doesn't mount to the camera body, you could still do something called lens whacking, which is when you kind of just insert the lens if it fits inside and just kind of hold it in place, and it makes for some interesting light leaks. Very artsy, very interesting. But I don't think that's
Not
what
the
we're
first thing
another
you want to
episode.
do on assignment.
Right.
but-
That's not. Alan, out of all people in the world, I thought you'd be the first person to do that on an assignment.
Even I have my standards.
Even now, really?
Well, okay, maybe not. Okay.
But I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about is lenses that will actually insert and fit properly into. So that part over there, being that the camera manufacturers like Nikon's have been since the 50s with the same F mount, and Canon, even though they switched over to EF, they've been kind of going strong with that mount. Everyone's kind of been in with their same consistent mounts. So the mounts, if you have a dummy lens, is very easy to work with, because even if you change the firmware, the camera still clicks when you tell it to click. The challenge comes with when you want to do an autofocus and fully electronically controlled lens. And to my understanding, all these third-party manufacturers are reverse engineering the system. So yeah, just like when they released an update and they tweaked it for one of a Canon lens, let's say that wasn't performing as well, Canon releases an update to say, hey, here's how we can make our lenses work better. And then Sigma goes, holy crud, they changed the code of the autofocus. Now we need to change something in our stuff and then release an update also. and that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I know with the Sigma that I use, which is a generation or two back, it autofocuses, but it doesn't do it the way, the proprietary lens does.
The new stuff works a lot better.
And it also, well, it goes camera to camera too.
Right.
I mean, as the camera's
Well,
up there.
we had a couple of the art lenses here, the 35s and the 50s. I think actually from the library, and and I was impressed with the response time and the resolving power.
Yeah.
Real sharp.
Well, it's not just Sigma too. I mean, Tokina and
Yeah,
Tamron
yeah,
are also,
yeah.
picking up that and running with it too. They're making improved lenses, and I guess it is fair to say that a lot of it has to do with mirrorless. Although these are lenses for DSLR we're talking about. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you about the reverse engineering. What about Zeiss and their relationship with Sony? Are they kind of working hand in hand, or are they also just kind of making things that?
So I don't know enough. I don't know.
Just curious about one thing. Have you noticed any color differences? Because Zeiss lenses, like Leica lens, they go for neutral color. Their coatings are made to get neutral. Do you notice a difference between the Zeiss lenses for Sony and the Sony lenses as far as are the Sony brands a little poppier? I've never compared.
To me, I haven't done a 1-to-1 yet, but to me, Zeiss has always leaned toward a little bit cooler.
Yeah.
In color, whereas Sony tends to lean a little bit more warm, and that's kind of my take on it. Like for me, Zeiss is kind of what I'd use to photograph if I weren't doing like a ton of color correction, or even if I was. I would use it to photograph or film something which had like a futuristic kind of feel, something that I wanted to be like sharp and like razor difference between where it's in focus and out of focus. That's kind of my feeling with the Zeiss lenses. Whereas the Sony lenses, they have that kind of same kind of like razor fall off, but they seem to be a little bit warmer in the highlights. I want to say, and that to me is less color correction that I have to do because it's already built into the way it's being shot.
Gotcha.
Cool. I know in some of the experience I've had with third-party lenses, usually you may have some problems around the edges. There can be. I mean, of course, we're going to talk about lenses up and down the price range, but ones that are from the major third-party lenses that I've used, it's the imaging is not really the issue. It comes down to sometimes their durability. Some of the little things, some of the knobs might fall off. It's going to be a little crunchy when you're adjusting focus manually.
Yeah, so if I could jump in here real quick, I'm really glad you're bringing that up because we're not really talking about that. So when we talk about third-party lenses, there's premium third-party lenses, which is the stuff we've been talking about right now, like the Sigma Art, the Tamron VCDIs, the
Firon lenses from Tokina.
From Tokina,
certainly the Zeiss.
The Zeiss, any of the Zeiss lenses, Loxia.
There are also a whole bunch of lenses that cost under $200 or even $100.
Exactly. We're going to get into those.
And we're going to get to that stuff, yeah.
Right, and that's I think the big differentiator because when we're talking about those type of lenses, that's usually where you find a lot more issues and problems because they're really trying to deliver a budget solution.
Yep.
And you find a lot less sharpness on the edges, a
little more wobble in the barrel.
And that's because you're paying $200 instead of $400 from the manufacturer's version of that same type of economy lens.
I once had somebody explain to me what the real difference is, often what the difference is between the real low-priced lenses and what, according to the specs, seems like the same lens, but it costs $100 or more. And that is with the better lens, the focusing helicoid and all of the components have much finer tooling to them, smaller, threads, finer threads for smoothness, whereas the less expensive lens will have coarser threads and thicker grease.
Right.
And what happens is out of the box, and this is true, out of the box they feel terrific, but if they go through 1 or 2 seasons of hot, cold, whatever, or just use, the lubricants start gumming up, and that's when you get the wobble and everything else that goes on to it. So it could be sharp, but it could be a disaster to actually use after a while, just annoying.
Right. What do you guys know about, like, for example, internal focusing and internal zoom compared to external zoom? Because it seems that
external zoom is cheaper to manufacture, which is why you find it that way, and it's a nuisance.
Yeah.
Because the lens keeps changing size. You scare somebody sometimes. You zoom in on them. And also they're invariably variable aperture lenses, which means the f-stops are not constant.
Right.
And noisier.
Yeah. And they get a little bit of clunky after a while.
Yep.
What about, like, let's say you're setting up your system, your Canon Nikon shooter, and you have to budget. You have to decide what you're going to buy, where you're going to allocate what your money you have. So you're going to want to buy perhaps one of an L series Canon lens or a high end Nikon lens, and then you may want to spread your funds around. Any thoughts on that? Like where you might want to go with? I mean, for me, know, 24, 70, 70, 200.
Can we give something a little clear? Like what's
I'll
the
give you a
person
good
doing?
example
What kind of photography?
Here's an
Okay.
example. I got a great example. Say you do general shooting, but every once in a while you have to do something, say with architecture, or it needs some kind of perspective control. You can buy a tilt shift lens from Nikon, Canon, and or other manufacturers, and spend a lot of money, and they're great lenses.
2,000 for a 24. Let's
Yeah.
say,
Or you can buy one of the tilt shifts from, say, Sanyang or Rokinon, which are
800.
$800, and they're very sharp. They're not made quite the same way, but I've shot side by side. At the end of the day, your pictures are great. Now, if I'm shooting all the time and I'm using it constantly, I'm going to buy the better lens because I know it'll last longer. But if it's the kind of thing where it's an occasional use, save your money, get good pictures, and you'll be using that same lens for a long time.
Another thing is if you're a landscape shooter and you don't need autofocus, why go there?
Exactly.
You know,
Which is where we have these manufacturers out of Korea, Samyang, Rokinon, Bauer, Optec are all pretty much made out of the same factory. And John brought up a good point that like if you're doing landscape or something like that where you don't need autofocus really fast, that's where these lenses really shine. Like we're seeing them very popular in video because people who are shooting video until recently, there hasn't really been good autofocus for video. So being able to just control the manual focus at a price drop of $800 or even thousands of dollars if you're going to go up to like proper cinema lenses, it was a great exchange. If you were shooting landscape or such, as long as you had the resolving power that you needed, these were great lenses at a very decent price. So,
or on the other side, for long telephoto lenses, if you're, someone who, let's say twice a year, you're going to go out into the woods and shoot birds or whatever, you may want to look to the Sigma long lens or Tokina, who was kind of well known for that at a certain point, as opposed to Nikon, Canon, where you're gonna save $1,000 easy, right?
Right. Well, depending what lens you're going for, Sigma makes some interesting, like a 120 to 300. They make some interesting lenses. I would almost caution someone to say, like, if you're only going out once or twice a year and you're going to photograph birds, rent the big lens.
Yeah,
That's a good point. Yeah.
Actually, that's a point we were going to talk about in general. Test by renting. It's not a bad idea.
There's some great websites out there right now that'll really very helpful to someone who's kind of looking. It's worth the I want to call it like lesser investment, even if it costs you a couple $100 to rent a lens, particularly if you're looking to buy any of these $1,500 and up type of lenses, particularly if you're looking for a big lens, because that's easily going to start costing you $3-4K.
We're talking about price, and I think really it does get down to price. I mean, now there are options, and there's a whole bunch of reasons, but in general, I think the discussion goes around price versus quality. Here's 70 to 200. Your Tamron 70-200 2.8 is $1,500. Sigma 1,200. Canon 1,900, and the new Nikon is 2,800. So
Right.
you're seeing some.
What did you say for
difference.
Canon? Canon's like 2,200, I think, for the new one, right?
I had 19 for the one that I saw.
I think it's always on. I think we always have it on like a discount.
Oh, yeah?
I
Okay.
think it's version 22.
All right,
There's another
shop at
interesting
B&H.
thing. In fact, Jason and I were talking about this the other day with wide-angle lenses. For the longest time, people who shot APS-C and Micro Four Thirds, they were compromised for wide-angle. But what I found is interesting with the new set, a lot of the Rokinon and Sanyang, they make some really nice extreme ultra-wides. Now, they're very sharp. The problem I had with them shooting on a full-frame camera is that the edges do get more distorted than some of the major brands like a Nikon or a Canon. Not only pincushion, but like mustache distortions. Now, if you're shooting APS-C, that part's cropped out, and what you have is the sweet spot that is still really wide angle. So that's a great use for those lenses. If you have APS-C, look at these because they're not expensive. They're manual focus, but you get great pics from them.
That's a great point, and I think a really important point is that a lot of these lenses might be made for full frame, but they'll still fit onto an APS-C sensor.
Yeah.
And then if you
And might even be better.
Right, exactly, because you're maximizing the center where generally the third-party lenses aren't terrible in the center. They're going to be terrible toward the outer. And when I'm saying third-party over here, I want to correct it a little bit. I want to say third-party budget lenses because the higher-end third-party is...
Yeah.
When we come back, we're gonna kind of break down the different price points and quality. We're gonna kind of give a list, but yeah, it is good to differentiate.
I think that's really important because particularly nowadays, because back in the day, I think, well, I guess we'll talk about it, but I think back in the day, Zeiss was like the only one. Now we have a lot of very interesting manufacturers.
Well, let's jump to
doing
this
nice
idea
stuff.
of mirrorless, which we talked about briefly. But I mean, it seems to me that with the creation of mirrorless cameras, there was a vacuum, that got filled quickly by Rokinon and now Zeiss and others, because the manufacturers hadn't caught up with their lens systems. And
I think mirrorless opened up a very interesting possibility, and we really saw this in the video world. The video world had kind of like one mount; they have a PL mount, and then every manufacturer makes for positive lock. And so you can get a bunch of different lenses. Then it all depended on sensor size, whether or not your lenses could fit. So you'd have 4x3 anamorphic or 16x9, whatever you were doing, you'd figure out what lenses would fit it, right? Great. In photo, we've been so used to being locked into EF mount or F mount, and because everything was autofocus. Earlier, I don't even think we were recording at the time when Alan was talking about when you had like these T mount lenses and stuff like that. This is something that was already going on, just I don't think it was as popular. As soon as adapters started coming out and you realized that, hey, I can mount a Canon lens on my Sony camera or a Nikon lens on my Sony camera, it opened up the possibility to be like, hey, what other lenses can I open up? And people started digging through their
when I look at
backyards or their
lenses
garages.
here in the story or wherever it is, the manufacturer's second, I'm looking for interesting lenses, good lenses, and if they're good, I know I could adapt them to my mirrorless camera. That to me is
Exactly.
wonderful. That's another thing. Well, also you mentioned with the T-mounts, back in the day when a lot of these original manufacturers, Soligar, Vivitar, Tamron, all came out initially, they were known specifically and only for budget, and I don't even know if they had fixed mounts back then. It was all T-mounts. You bought the lens and then you bought the adapter to put it onto your Canon, Nikon, Pentax, and they invariably were wobbly. They're never good. So you knew what you're going into. But now they're still kind of catering to that end of the market in, I think, in better form, but they're also catering to the high end of the market, which is good for everybody.
Well, we were talking yesterday about the Adaptol system.
Yes.
Remember from the 70s, which was a Tamron thing, and they would you would get the lens, and it would come with 3 or 4 different mounts.
Yes.
And you could put it onto it and change
That
if
is
you wanted to go back
fascinating.
and forth. Yeah.
So Sigma will actually do that for you.
Well, Sigma
If
will
you-
change mounts. Yeah, you
will
can send
change
it
your
back
mount.
and they'll change your mount. Yeah, but they won't change it from a Nikon to a Canon, will they? They'll change it from a Sigma to a
Is
Nikon.
it only Sigma to something else? I'm
think.
not sure.
I'm not sure either.
The other interesting thing to point out is that with all these lenses, nowadays there's so many people who own the same premium lens. I own a 24-70. John Harris owns a 24-70. Alan owns a 24-70.
No, I don't.
Well, I don't know when I did. But
I
I'm
don't.
saying,
I
I'm
swore
saying
them
that
off.
Alan
the
doesn't, but
concept-
Al does.
Right, Alan does. But everyone's shooting with the same Canon 24-70 version 2. And at a certain point, all the shots start to look the same. I mean, you can see this when you're on Flickr. You can see this when you're on all the sites. You're seeing like, hey, the focal length looks exactly the same. The shot looks exactly the same. It's retouched the same way. And what's starting to happen is people are pulling out specialty lenses or slightly off-brand lenses because they're getting a slightly different look.
Yeah, it's a different signature. Absolutely.
And my example for this is I had one of the 51.8 Thrifty 50s, like original from Canon, like the one which if you shot for it with too long, it was known for like the front lens element to kind of pop off. And that lens was terribly not sharp on the, I mean, we're talking like almost like smooth. But I loved the look it gave me. It gave me this super soft look on the outside. And even though I shot with the 51.2, I shot with the 51.4, I would always go back to that 51.8 because it's just like no one else is getting this look and I can get this look where the eyes are in focus and the forehead is not in focus and it's not a tilt shift lens.
Yeah.
So that's I think what's happening, and we're seeing some interesting stuff coming out from manufacturers. One of the ones I really want to point out is I think it's the Venus Optics 15 millimeter macro, which I think I sent John this an email. Like this is like awesome, a 15 millimeter, a wide angle macro lens, like. That is awesome. None of the regular companies are making that. No one even.
Kind of.
Yeah, who makes
I've been doing it. I have a Voigtlander 12 millimeter and 15 millimeter, and I
Yes.
put them on the VME adapter on my Sony, and now I have macro focusing.
Yep.
It
But-
costs a lot more than that, but I could also macro focus with any M mount lens I put on the camera. But yeah, no, that is a great lens, and it takes great pictures, and it's priced well.
And it's built into the lens instead of an adapter.
Yes.
Well, you're talking about the Thrifty 50, and I think that has a new definition now with the Young Now. $50.
That is 50/50. That is perfect, actually. 50 for 50.
And the other thing I want to mention quickly were reflex catadioptric. I'm sorry, I'm bad on this.
Kadioptric.
Catadioptric.
So I have it written down here
mirrored
somewhere because I can never say it.
The ultra telephotos that are, look like a can of
Catadioptric.
catadioptric.
Are we talking about like
exactly.
mirror
That's
lenses?
a mirror lens.
Mirror lenses, yeah.
Short
Which are pretty popular
telephotos.
and a real budget option if
That is
you
a
wanted
real
to
budget
shoot,
option.
ultra telephoto.
Yeah, you find those a lot for like really interesting things like stable stuff because they don't autofocus. They're a fixed f8 usually, and they're not super great. But I mean, you're going to get 800 millimeters f4 for or f8 for what is it, a couple $100?
Yeah. Exactly.
I've owned a few over the years, and every once in a while I hit a picture that is just solid with it, and they're another story.
I think they use a lot for astrophotography,
Yes.
really photographing the moon or
The big
something
problem
like
is that it turns, instead of bokeh, you get these donuts.
Right.
That's what
Exactly.
they call them, donuts,
Yeah.
and it looks
Yeah.
like a whole these circles all over the place.
So let's take a break, and we'll come back and talk. We'll go through the list.
Like the man says, we're going to take a break and come back for the list.
Yes, master. I will do as you say.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
We are back. Before we go through a list of who makes what, something I think is really important to note, and that goes for all lenses, is that if you were to go into the store or go to the factory and pull a half a dozen samples randomly and actually bench test them, they're not the same.
Yep.
It's the same thing with cameras, the meters. There's like 20% slop allowed, plus and minus. And lenses have their tolerances. They have to be sharp. They have to hit certain standards. But if you pull out a half a dozen random lenses, you're going to find one or two that are going to be notably better, and maybe one or two that are really bad. Especially when
the
you're dealing
tolerances
with,
are
I don't
different.
know if the use of polymers increases or decreases that. I don't know if a lot of these composite materials are actually more precision in a certain sense as far as measurements than their aluminum or brass or alloy counterparts.
We've got to get an engineer in here one time, one of the lens engineers from someone.
That is something we've been working on. I know it was mentioned earlier, but I'd like to reemphasize. You're going to find some focal lengths by these third-party manufacturers that you're not going to find from the majors, and that's another great advantage. I mean, especially if you're really building up your collection of lenses or you have a specific need, they're out there for you.
Sometimes you have no choice if they make something that no one else does.
That or you just, or right now I'm finding that people want something just slightly different.
Right.
Yep.
Just to try even. Or, or like you said, to get a different look that everybody else has.
So,
All right, so let's start with... let's start at the bottom, right?
Okay, the least expensive lenses we have here. And now I'm going to attempt this pronunciation. Yongyao?
I think in English we call it Yongnuo, but I think the proper pronunciation is Yongnao.
Yongyao. Okay.
Yongyao.
Please forgive us.
And if anyone here speaks Chinese, please let us know.
Yeah, it's YONGNUO. And they make lenses in Canon and Nikon mounts. They're manufactured in China. And they have a 35 f2 for $93 and a 50 millimeter 1.8 for $49.95. That's $1 a millimeter. And these are the prices from our website, by the way. So really, come on, it doesn't get better than that. And if you look at them, they look like knockoffs of the basic cheapy lenses from Nikon and Canon. They're most basic lenses. These are knockoffs of them. And they may or may not be good. We have not used them yet. There's also the Optica.
The reviews are actually really good on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the reviews are really good.
And what about Midakon Zongkai?
Mikai Shungi.
Yeah.
I think it's, again, if someone here really knows how these are pronounced, please send those in.
Yeah, we're butchering it. There's no
With
doubt.
a voice note. Yeah. We apologize.
We should broadcast from the UN next time. We can grab somebody.
We have some people here.
We actually do. It's very true here. They also make turbo adapters. That's another thing that they do. What's interesting about their lenses, I found, they all have 9 to 12 aperture blades. They're all metal construction, and they make them for Canon, Nikon, Pentax, Sony A. They have a 35 f2 for $160, 24-17 for APS-C for $349. They also make some hefty stuff. They make a 50 0.95 for $700, and an 85 1.2 Speedmaster for $799. A 135 1.4 for $1698. Now that's pretty impressive. And they also make the goofiest lens we've seen here in years. That's that 20 millimeter
that macro thing.
That macro with a 4.5 X super macro, the one that you can get arrested for if you try using it in the streets. It's $199, and it is a conversation piece.
Well, that's
That's the one that looks like a long
Pinocchio lens.
antenna.
It's the one that grows like a snail snout. It's really scary, that thing. It is the creepiest looking lens I've ever seen in my life. You ever see snails? They put those little extenders out there.
It looks like an alien probe.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
That's what it looks like.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. This will be in the next
Or
Star Wars film.
or baton.
So anyway, those are kind of interesting.
What
And
about SLR Magic? It's pretty.
SLR Magic's
affordable.
also got some really interesting stuff going on. They also have a pretty decent name for what they're delivering. We sell a couple of them, I believe.
A 51-1. Well,
yeah,
these are cine lenses, though. No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
they make other things too.
Venus Optics. They're not that cheap, but they also have again a nice, interesting set of focal lengths.
Yeah, so a lot of these companies, it seems to me at least, some of them I have not been able to get my hands on yet, and we tried pretty hard last year to get them, and then hopefully this year we'll get our hands on them. They're coming out with kind of like this mid-range where they're not trying to be the best thing out there, but they're definitely not trying to be the worst.
Right.
They're not trying to be your super economy lens. They're trying to be interesting. They're trying to deliver the right amount of value for the right amount of dollar, I think is what some of these companies are coming in at.
One company that kind of catches my attention, and I've never used their lens. There's actually a couple of them here, but that Hand Division. You have any experience with those? Okay, we only got one of them in stock here, but what's kind of interesting, they're designed in Germany. It's a German-Chinese venture. They're for mirrorless cameras and Micro Four Thirds, Fuji X and Leica L. They're made of anodized aluminum, brass, stainless steel construction, and they're designed in Germany, manufactured in China. They have 10 iris blades, and they're interesting. They have a series they call the I think it's IBERIT,
Yeah.
IBERIT, or IBERIT, whatever. They're all f2.4, and there's a 24 millimeter, 35, 50, 75, and 90, and they're all 2.4, and they sell for between $550 and like $650. Which is really interesting. And then they make a 40 millimeter f/0.85 for $18.99.
But these are kind of going after certainly, like you said, the mirrorless people. They look like Leica lenses. Or
it kind of reminds me
Leica,
of
but-
what Voigtlander Cosina does.
Okay.
I mean, where you got an Asian company manufacturing German design products, which is neat. I'm looking forward to these.
So they have Leica L mount, Fuji X, Sony E, and Micro Four Thirds.
And most of these that we're talking about are all manual focus. I mean,
Yes.
the Iberia, the Minnetonka,
And which is one of the reasons
SLR
why they're not
Magics.
expensive. Exactly. Yep.
Let's jump up then to the Samyang. Samyang is the parent company, and they brand Rokinon, Bauer, Opteka, Bell and Howell, a whole bunch of other different ones. And I think we've all used them. They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
They have their place in the world, no doubt.
They definitely do. The one warning I will give with those is that their focus marks aren't exactly 100%. So if you're at infinity, this is where we're going back to tolerances, where if you're at the infinity mark, you may have to go a little bit before, a little bit after to actually achieve infinity.
So you have to make believe you're using a mirrorless camera with an adapter.
Yeah.
It's just really what you have to do.
Yeah.
I was looking at the Kowa 500 millimeter. Do you guys know that lens? I mean, it's not cheap. It's 500 millimeter, but and it's the only one that we sell from that brand. But they're not under the Samyang umbrella. But they look pretty interesting. They look like a good lens. I don't know much about it.
Let's see. Kowa?
But if anyone's KOWA, it's a 500 millimeter lens.
They've been
Look it up
around.
and join.
Cow's been around forever. That's a very old
Yeah,
company.
I've heard it, yeah.
I've not used it.
I think they make bikes too. But back to the Samyang, because it's always been a confusion for a lot of people when you see lenses that look almost exactly the same and with the same specs coming out from these different companies.
Because they are the same lens.
Because they are the same lens. So people should know that. And
I think originally they did it because they had specific brands going to different parts
countries,
of the world,
yeah.
different countries.
Yeah.
But now it's like everything's global.
well, I know, for example, here we have Rokinon, Samyang, Bauer. But I think if you go to Europe, they're branded as Falcon,
Yeah.
Walamex, Polar.
We have Olimax.
Do we?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So moving on up the ladder. what's
The
next?
one other thing about that is that sometimes they'll release, like autofocus will first come out in one of those brands. Like that's what they're doing now, and then they'll release it into other brands. So they'll come out with one lens and like their premium brand, and then bring it out to everyone else.
And they just started doing a few autofocus lenses. I mean, within the past
the
year,
50
right?
millimeter.
Right. Yeah. But they made, I mean, I like them. You know,
Good-
and
good
you were
price.
talking about the using them for cinema.
Yeah,
Yep.
good
All right.
good price.
Lots of options.
Now, we also have the Yasuhara lenses. If you can't focus a lens, you buy this.
Well, this
It's
is
an
now,
interest-
now we're talking about specialty, more
This
like
is, this is special.
specialty, yeah.
This is a single meniscus. It's a 100-year-old design. They basically took a 100-year-old Kodak camera, opened up the lens, saw how it was made, and then they reproduced them. And they got the Momo 100, and they got a 43mm f6.4 soft focus lens. It's $179 for DSLRs. And then they make for mirrorless lenses a 100mm. A 28mm f6.4 soft focus lens, also $179. And then they make the Madoka 180 fisheye for $279. But they're all soft focus, and they actually are very neat. They're interesting looking lenses.
So soft focus was in for a while. Like Nikon had a soft focus lens, portrait lens, way back.
Which now I think is being reintroduced as
It's
a
being-
135 f2 by one of the independents now.
Exactly, and then you have what's their names? Lens Baby came out with the Velvet, and so it's a very it's once
Minolta
again.
had a couple also, I believe, in that range.
Yeah, there were a few companies because there was a certain point in time I specifically remember, like if you take a look at stock photos from or portrait photography from, I want to say 80s, you'll always see this kind of like soft focusy like type of look.
Wedding photography.
Wedding photography, exactly. Alan's specialty.
Portrait stuff. Senior photos.
Exactly, see your photo, like all that kind of stuff. You had this kind of soft focus type of look, and like it wasn't just soft focus on the background; it also was soft focus on the skin. It was always highlighted as look dramatic, and like it was like retouching before retouching. And what's really fascinating about it is that like this is again, it's another way of getting a different look than other people are getting in camera.
Yeah.
So continuing with specialty, Lens Baby's been kind of the big player in that the past few years. Lomography last year or a year or so ago came out with a Petsfall. Elements in the Yasuhara. The Sunex 5.6 millimeter f 5.6 super fisheye fixed focus lens. Another one out there. But let's jump ahead to
I'll tell you a company that
Yeah.
I find interesting. I find them a lot of them, but this Meyer Optik Gorlitz.
Oh, yeah.
Now that's an old German name, and they've revised them, and they're interesting lenses. They're not inexpensive. They're made in Germany. They're made with shot glass. They have O'Hara AR coatings. I've never heard of Irish lens coatings. And interesting, they have declicked aperture rings and up to 15 iris blades. So they're taking bokeh real seriously. But they have lenses, a 50 0.95. That's like a Noctilux. It's $3,000. A 50 2.9, a 58 19, 75 19, and a 102.8. Each of them, they all sell like $14.99 to $19.99. So they're not inexpensive, but they sound really interesting, and it sounds like they're really trying to get a real deal lens going here.
right. So we're talking the high end. Now we've kind of jumped.
Yeah.
We've jumped over.
You don't expect
one
me to
segment.
stick to script, do you?
No, I don't. But this is good because we should be talking about the high end now. But so yeah, good introduction with the Meyer Optik Gorlitz. Schneider, obviously a well-known name, especially in cinema, correct?
Yep.
And they
make
specialize in tilt shifts.
Very wonderful and very expensive lenses. But Zeiss is kind of the main.
Zeiss rebranded
manufacturer.
last year,
Yeah.
pretty much. They did a really, really good job.
The Milvis lenses are a nice update of the
ZEZF.
ZEZF series lenses, which I used. I've owned many of them. I've used most all of them. In fact, I have used all of them. And then an opportunity to go out with a couple of the new Milvis lenses a few months back, and they're really nice. There was a nice upgrade on them.
Yeah.
And mostly mirrorless, right?
No, the Milvis are the are the SLR SLR ones. So they
And the Otis were SLR.
Yeah.
Right.
And kind of what they've done is they've done that new housing, which they have on the Otis, onto the Milvis.
Right.
What it also introduces is that they're able to use their focus ring. They came out with a custom focus ring that works on their lenses, which is a really nice piece. It's a $200 focus ring.
Wow.
But it is really nice.
And they're still all manual focus though.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's until you get to Battis.
Right.
And do it.
Batis.
Battis.
And Voigtlander, of course. Anybody?
Yeah, Voigtlander. I'm a huge fan of Voigtlander, and I think what's most interesting, aside from the fact that they made some terrific Leica M series lenses, which they're discontinuing now. But what's really exciting about them are the new versions of their 15, 12, and 10 millimeter rectilinear ultra wides.
Wow.
I used the 10 millimeter. I just a review on it some months ago, and the lens is phenomenal. It's like 130 something degree angle of view, 120. It's ridiculously
These are
wide.
right up your alley.
Oh yes, it is. But it's also pretty much distortion free. It's amazing. I mean, and it's very, very sharp, especially towards the edges. If you used older versions of the Voigtlander, say 12 and 15, which I have, the edges are always a little bit mushy, but the new Series 3, the newest versions of them, are amazingly sharp right up to the corners. And they're priced well, like under $1,000, which is, if you think about it, go back a few years to ultra wides that were not half as good, they were a lot more money.
Yeah, they were popular. Not they've really become repopular with the growth of mirrorless.
Yeah, and they're also made out of brass and steel. You look
Yeah,
at this;
they're real lenses.
They're heavy. They're
Yeah.
beautifully made. They take it.
So jumping ahead to what we're calling the major third-party lenses, and we've spoken about them already, but we have Sigma, Tokina, and Tamron, right? And those are the major players in this, and they've all put out really good lenses in the past few years. They're all stepping up their game, as we talked about earlier. They're having the cake and eat it too, right? I mean, having good prices and quality optics. And these are also autofocus lenses.
Yeah, a couple years ago when Sigma came out with their 35-1.4, which was kind of the beginning of this art series, it took Canon and Nikon for a real challenge, and it came out at, I think, $899, and Canon and Nikon were both in the $1,300 to $1,400 range.
Yeah.
And both manufacturers had to really step up.
Mm-hmm.
And what about the Firen? Tokina Firen.
That's also that I get the impression that's like their version of the art series lenses. They're
But
going
it's
after
E-mount.
high end.
But it's
But it's
E-mount.
E-mount.
E-mount, yes,
Yeah.
only, which is another interesting thing.
Right.
There are a few of these lenses that are only available for
Yeah.
E-mount.
Sony.
Exactly. So
That's
it's
interesting.
showing you that Sony is really becoming a very interesting player in this market.
Oh yeah.
The Firen is interesting, particularly because it's fitting into their brand. What their brand is that they do these kind of budget, well, I don't want to say budget, but price-friendly wide-angle lenses. You know, they had the 11 to 16 for a long time, 2.8 for APS-C, which a lot of people really enjoyed. And now it's a 20 millimeter, and it's really nice. I've seen photos from it. It looks great.
I'm interested in seeing that lens.
Yeah.
That I want to see.
So check them out, right? I mean, who shouldn't be buying a third-party lens?
Who shouldn't be?
Who should not?
Professional under CPS or MPS is kind of like the only place where I can think of it. Someone who is day in, day out shooting, and if, God forbid, something happens to their camera, they need auto replacement or overnight replacement, then that would be the one person I would caution away from it.
Good point. Yeah. That's pretty narrow parameters, though, because as I said, if you're looking for budget, mid-range, or high-end, you're pretty much covered here in all ways. That's my take.
Imagine that there's going to be some people who are going to, question that and say, if you're, a sports guy or a news girl, you don't want to take any chances. Person, you want the autofocus to be as sharp and as fast as possible. Not to mention all of the compatibility.
Well, we noticed the art lenses were fast. Now, I couldn't say how it compared to, say, a Nikon Prime that would be equal to or a Canon. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it responded very nicely. Whatever I aimed, I was getting it. It was happening.
If you're a sports shooter, none of these lenses really exist in the third party yet. Sigma's tried to make some roads in there, but you're really shooting Canon or Nikon. And in that arena, because you can't be down ever.
That's true.
Because that's your job. I mean, you want to be a part of CPS. You want to be a Canon Professional Services.
Yeah.
Or MPS if you're on the Nikon side. And like you saw what happened in the Olympics in Rio. So one guy got his whole camera bag stolen, and Canon right away was able to re-outfit him, pretty much immediately because they have a whole booth down there. They have stuff.
But for our listeners, check them out.
Yeah.
Well, this has been informative and entertaining. Hope you guys
First Gearcast.
Our first Gearcast. I hope everybody's happy at
Thank you,
home.
Jason.
I want to know when I'm getting the frequent flyer miles.
Yeah,
We're going to let you know.
When do you upgrade my seat to the first class seat is what I'm waiting for instead of this.
You are having your card punched every time you leave here, right?
I try.
Okay, because you need 10 punches for the upgraded chair. Okay. Levi, thank you so much for stopping in again, and we look forward to having you again. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, John. Thank you, our listeners. Take a moment, go to iTunes, sign up, do a review on us. We do take them seriously. We are very interested in what you have to say, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in today.
And what are your favorite lenses? Let us know.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Let us
absolutely.
know.
Let us know. Subscribe on iTunes. Check out Explora, bnh.com, Explora.
Now, can you say that with a little more energy behind it?
It's all right. We'll redo it.